Hello and welcome to Film Lovers. I'm Sonia Chung. Today I'm joined by my friend Tom Jolliff. Tom, hello, how are you?
Hi Sonia, I'm very good. How are you?
Okay. Sorry if I sound a bit sort of out of practice. We haven't done this in a long time, have we?
No, it's been a while.
Yeah. Been busy and everyone's busy, etc. etc. So why don't you tell us what we're gonna do today, Tom?
Well, it's not brilliant in the world at the moment, so I think everyone needs a little bit of cheering up. So we're going to do our favourite feel-good films.
Yeah, I think that's what well needed at this moment in time because everyone's going through a bit of a rough time, so we need some cheering up, like you said. So, all right. Well, you've got a list of options, not options, choices, and I've got a list of choices. So, why don't you go first, and then we'll take it in turns.
Okay. You might have this one, and
All right.
I'm going for this one first because it's Thanksgiving time in America at the moment. So,
Oh, I bet I know what you're going to go
yeah,
for.
for
Go
our American cousins. Uh, it's going to be planes, trains, and automobiles.
on. Funnily enough, I haven't got that on my list because I think we covered it on
Yeah.
the John Hughes special. But why don't you tell everyone why that's your feel good, one of your feel good films?
I think it's one of those films where I pretty much watch it every year. So around about this time of year, um, I watch the film. I used to watch it kind of around Christmas time because it's obviously we don't have Thanksgiving in the UK.
Hmm.
It's kind of creeping in a little bit more as like a trend. You see it in a few coffee shops and things, but yeah. So it used to be a Christmas kind of thing for me, and now I tend to sort of because there's so many Christmas films that you have to get through, I've kind of
Hmm.
pulled it back and then I do it around about Thanksgiving time.
Hmm.
Um, it's just, you've got John Candy at his best, and then I think it's Steve Martin's best role as well.
Yeah.
And I think, it's just this really good sort of feel good film. Uh, this
And there's a
kind
good
of,
camaraderie between them, isn't there?
yeah, they've got great chemistry in it. So John Candy plays the kind of like this bumbling kind
Salesman.
of annoyance, really. That so yeah, Steve Martin's trying to get home, desperately trying to get home for Thanksgiving, and every sort of step of the way, something goes wrong, and it usually goes wrong because he's kind of you know tied in with John Candy, and he can't really shake him off.
Well, no,
Um,
they keep bumping into each other,
yeah,
you know, and
yeah,
it's not like it's always something goes wrong, doesn't it?
yeah. I mean, like John Candy is always like likable for the audience. We like him right from the beginning, even though he's a little bit kind of for Steve Martin's character, he's quite annoying, but we quite like him from the off. But I think what's good about the film is that as it progresses, you can kind of see how he's becoming more and more endearing to Steve Martin's character, and then
Yeah,
yeah,
and also I think, like you said, like you notice, how kind of uptight and a bit stuck up Steve Martin's character is. Is it Neil?
yeah,
And then, obviously, his kind of just trying to get home, basically his adventures, and he keeps bumping into this guy who he really doesn't like or can't stand to begin with, can he? But they kind of thrusted upon each other in some kind of strange way every time they sort of come across each other, and you can see that his demeanor is kind of softening, especially when it gets towards the end. Does that make
yeah,
sense?
yeah. I mean, he's so driven to get back home to his family,
Yeah,
and he kind of realizes he's spending too much time away from them. And then the more he kind of gets out of his thinking about himself all the time and sort of he starts thinking about, things that John Candy has said and like hints of the way he behaves and what he's been doing. And he
yeah,
kind of realizes that there's more to this, this character, Del Griffith, than meets the eye. And he got that moment when he kind of realizes, oh God, this guy basically he's not going home because he hasn't really got a home to go to.
No, but
Um,
his John Candy has this kind of, well, his character brings out this kind of nice soft side of Steve Martin, if you know what I mean. So
yeah,
you can tell that actually, you know, as the end approaches, that um Steve Martin's character Neil is heavily influenced by, you know, John Candy's positive side, you know, because he's very endearing, isn't he, John Candy, in that film? I can't remember his name. Is it Dell?
yeah,
Yeah, it's
Dell,
Dell,
yeah,
isn't it?
the shower curtain guy.
Yeah, and you think about it. I mean, it is really sad towards the end when you realise actually, I can see what happened, can't I?
It's all right.
That
It's
you
been
know,
35 years.
spoiler, guys,
Yeah,
sorry, that his wife has passed away like 8 years ago. So basically, he hasn't had a home, and he's just a traveling salesman going from one place to the next, and you know, that kind of makes him realize, the Steve Martin character, that actually, why have I, you know, I've been away from home, like you said, so much, you know, and it's kind of a bit of a Scrooge type story in a way. Do you know what I mean? Like, he
yeah,
realizes how much he's not been grateful for, you know, and he's kind of um just not been paying attention to, you know, when this poor other guy, has had basically no home to go to and no one to go home to. So yeah, it's a nice story about friendship, and I think that's why it holds up so well, especially at this time of year.
yeah, definitely. I mean, it's John Hughes at his best. So he was always good at, he'd have silly humor, kind of physical humor, lots of funny gags as well. There's just all these great, really sort of surreal moments and like odd characters that they encounter throughout the whole kind of thing.
Mm.
Um, but then what all pulls it together is that there's a bit of it's quite heartfelt as well, and I think
Yeah,
that's probably why it's
I
my
reckon.
favourite Hughes film. I think.
Well, I reckon out of all of them, that's probably his most kind of um emotional, sort of poignant films. You know,
Yeah,
it really kind of it actually strikes a bit of a nerve in you. Does that make sense? Compared to his other films where they're a bit more fun and teenagery, or they're
yeah,
about teenage angst and growing up and things like that. But you very rarely see John Hughes films which kind of focus more on adults. Really, I mean, there was the other one he did with you know, the Brat Pack at the time. What was that called? Uh,
um, was it
St
St
Elmo's Fire.
Elmo's Fire? Yeah, I mean, even then,
Yeah,
they were sort of young adults, so they were just coming into adulthood and
yeah, they were kind of like in their
responsibility.
20s when they were
Yeah,
coming of age. But this one is probably the only one he ever did where it's actually about, you know, adults, you know, grown
yeah.
ups.
I mean, he did a
Um,
couple of other ones, but they were never quite as memorable, or
yeah,
the ones that tend to get forgotten about. Um, I can't even remember the name of it. There was one starring Ed O'Neill's. Yeah, but that was a sort of in the mid sort of 90s when he was just going downhill slightly.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, I don't know. All right then. Is there anything else you want to say about planes, trains, and automobiles? I mean, we've covered a lot of it in the
yeah.
John Hughes, so if you guys want to listen to more, then go back to the
I
John
just think
Hughes.
it's the one film you need to watch around
Yeah,
Thanksgiving time.
for sure.
There's
Or
no other
Christmas.
option.
Or Christmas time.
Yeah.
All right then. Anything else you want to say about that, Tom?
No, that's just one of those that I can just rewatch, loads of
Over and over
times.
again.
Yeah.
Yeah, I need to watch it again, and it's on Netflix, so I think I'll
Oh yeah, you've just reminded me
give.
there. Yeah. So
Yeah, yeah,
I need to
yeah.
get on that
I'll give
quite
it
soon.
a rewatch since
Yeah.
it's that time of year. It's more appropriate. All right then. So should we go on to one of mine?
Yep, can do.
I'm gonna go for. I'm not sure if you've seen this one, but I can tell this would be kind of up your alley. National Lampoon's European Vacation. So that's kind of like another
Well, that's John
Hughesy.
Hughes again, isn't it?
Well, he didn't
Yeah.
direct it; he
No,
wrote it.
he and I think he produced it, didn't he?
Yeah, yeah. So,
Yeah.
so, and you can always kind of tell his influences because he's kind of very silly, isn't he? He's very
Yeah.
kind of childlike, really. He's a big kid, so you can tell there's a bit of a Hughesy influence going on. So yeah, even though he didn't make the film, he I think he definitely wrote it and produced it, so he had something to do with it. Have you seen that film, Tom?
I have, yeah, I've seen the original, that one, Christmas Vacation.
And
I
that
think
one.
that's probably my favourite of
Well, I was going to
three, I
say,
think.
out of all of them, I think the European Vacation one is the most funniest and the most memorable one. It's
Yeah.
just
Plus,
so
I think
cringeworthy.
they go through the UK, don't they, at one point
Well,
as
they
well?
go traveling throughout
Yeah,
Europe because they win
yeah,
a competition, a game show, like a
yeah,
family game show. So they win, and this family, especially with Clark. Is it Clark Griswold? Is that his name?
yeah,
With everywhere they go, there's always like trouble follows them, and there's one point when they go to they're in the UK and they go to Stonehenge and they're like, "Look at this, kids! This is," and then they're about to go and they drive off and he accidentally backs up. He backs up and he accidentally knocks one over and it kind of this like amazing, God knows how old, monument. It goes down like a block of dominoes,
yeah,
and all the tourists are like sort of standing there, gormless, with their mouths open. It's just absolutely hysterical. I mean, it's cringeworthy, but it's really,
yeah.
really, really
It's like that
funny.
throughout, isn't it? So it's always
Yeah,
cringe-worthy
it's just really
moments.
goofy. It's not. It's like there's nothing. You don't have to use any brain power to focus on it. It's just really good fun. Um, And there's always that scene in when they go to Germany and they they visit who they think is their relatives. Do you remember
Yeah,
this bit? And
I
they
think I can remember that bit. Yeah,
they turn up with the wrong house, so they stay with these people. They have no idea this nice old couple, and this old couple is like feeding them and putting them up for the night. And then next morning they're like saying their goodbyes to them, and as they leave and drive off, the old couple like, who were they? And it turns out they went to the wrong house. It was one next door to them. So their poor relatives are like thinking these they never turned up. Where are they? And there's that funny folklore dance. But it's just one of those films that's really, really cheesy and silly and goofy, and I think it works really well. And you can tell like that kind of friction that happens when you go on holiday with your family, especially abroad. One wants to do this, the other one wants to do that. The dad's kind of fixated on doing so much sightseeing, and
yeah,
there's a scene where they're going round and round the roundabout, and he can't get off the roundabout because they don't have roundabouts in the States, do they? So, so they don't. So he's like, "Hey kids, look at that! It's Big Ben," and then like hours later, they're still going around this roundabout. It's just so many goofy, sort of funny scenes like that. I'm sure you know every tourist can kind of relate to it at some point or another. But yeah, and also there's that scene with the French waiter. Do you remember that bit?
I can't remember that bit. I've,
There's they go to Paris, and he's trying to impress the waiter and his family by speaking French. He's got one of these digital translator things, it translates from English into French. And he's American and he doesn't know a word of French, so he's speaking like really bad, the way he's translating. And the the waiter's being really polite to them by the way he's like, his mannerisms and stuff. But actually when he's replying to him, he's he's saying the rudest, foulest thing, and he's like basically swearing about him and his family. And his waiter, but behaves so nice, but actually he's been really, really rude and obnoxious about his whole family. Basically, he's saying, go F yourselves kind of thing, but really nicely.
yeah,
um, and you can kind of imagine that sort of situation happening, sort of. Do you know what I mean? Especially those
yeah,
kind of
definitely,
most
yeah,
touristic spots. So yeah, National Lampoon's European Vacation, but it's just really good fun. Like I said, it's cheesy, you don't need to think, and it's kind of a really good sort of silly, feel good family film. Really, it's harmless, really. and they stick together, and then at the end they go back home, and it's all kind of, you know, um, tied into one, really. So yeah, that was one of my choices. All right, do you want to go into yours?
Yep. So this is one I've seen loads of times, but I kind of recently rewatched it again. Um, and then I remembered how much I loved it, and I watched it the next day and introduced it to my wife and daughter, um, and they loved it as well. Little Shop of Horrors.
Oh, really? Do you know
Yeah.
what's funny is that film? My dad took me to see that film when it came out in a cinema, and I don't know how old I was. I was probably about 6 or 7, and I found it too scary, so we left. But actually, yeah, it is really good fun. Why did you pick that one, Tom?
Well, I think when I watched it again a few weeks ago, it was even sort of better than I remembered it. Because it popped up on Amazon, and I thought, oh yes, because I'd been meaning to kind of catch up and watch it again at some point. Um, it's just right from the off. It's all the songs, the design. It's like the perfect like package of 90 minutes. So
And
it's
it's
quite short, yeah. And
and it's so funny, isn't it? So I don't
yeah,
interrupt you, but it's so funny because this awful man-eating plant has like is singing and talking like a black man who's obviously, there's also
yeah,
black acts. So it's just the most, the funniest voice coming out of this big thing. It's just absolute genius, I think. Do you know what I mean?
yeah. And I think Rick Moranis is another one of those kind of actors of that era who was just always really likable in all his films.
Yeah.
So he's really easy to get behind. And then Ellen Green plays Audrey in the film, and I think this was based on a stage show which was based on this old Roger Corman B movie from like the 1960s.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, the musical stage show this film was based on. She was actually in the stage show. I think quite a few of them were in the show.
Ah,
I don't think Rick Moranis was, so I think he was cast. But she played that role on stage as well before she did the film. But yeah, she's really good in it as well. Um,
yeah.
it's just one of those you'll watch it, you'll have a lot of fun. There's lots of silly humor as well. Really great cameos in it as well. So John Candy again popping up in that one,
Bill
and then
Murray.
yeah, Steve Martin as well. So you got a bit
Oh,
of
I was going to say Steve Martin is hilarious. It's kind of like the Elvis
yeah,
Presley, evil, sadistic dentist, and he's got that song. that comes in. And yeah, there's a scene with him and Bill Murray. And Bill Murray's like, I need a long, painful root canal. So you got like what do you call it? Like this sadist and this masochist kind of coming together.
yeah,
And it's really
and
funny. And then you
yeah,
got a cameo from Miriam Margolyes.
yeah. She plays the receptionist, so she's in it like very
Yeah,
briefly.
yeah. He's really mean to her because he's always like punching her.
Yeah,
So yeah, there's lots of yeah. But my favorite song in that is definitely Steve Martin's. I am your dentist. That one. And Femi Seymour
yeah.
is just amazing. But yeah, what did your daughter think watching it? Was she scared?
She was a little bit scared by the plant,
It is
particularly
quite
when
scary for a little
yeah,
person. I mean,
but
I was
yeah,
scared.
but she did really get into it, and then she liked the songs as well.
Mm.
So everyone the next day was singing, Little Shop of Horror songs. Um,
Did you
because
know
that's
that Jack Nicholson did it as well? But I don't think he sang in the film version that he
no,
did.
so I mean, no, the original film was just like a straight up kind of B movie.
Yeah, was that the one with Jack Nicholson?
Yeah, and this was made by Roger Corman. He was quite sort of infamous for making lots of low budget um, B movies and things like that, and sci-fi films. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Did he?
so
Did he say? I didn't hear because you cut off. Was that the one with Jack Nicholson?
yeah, yeah, Jack Nicholson was in that
Yeah,
one. Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
and then
So
for
that was a
some reason,
straight up.
yeah, they kind of based they used that as the basis for the stage show, the stage musical.
Yeah, yeah. It is a good basis for a musical, though. It's really good fun.
It is,
Yeah.
yeah, and I think the important thing is that the songs are really kind of catchy as well.
Mm.
So yeah, they were just got stuck in my head for a few weeks after watching it again.
A songworm.
Yeah, definite songworms, like a
Yeah,
whole
yeah.
album's worth.
Yeah, 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 for sure. No, it's got a very catchy album. It is a really good musical slash film. So yeah, for sure. Is there anything else you want to say about it?
No, it's just like really good fun, short to the point, and then great songs, really funny, and you're it's quite endearing as well, quite charming. The film.
Yeah, yeah. All right then. Should we go into one of mine?
Yep.
Hello.
Yes, should we do one of yours?
Yeah, sorry, you cut off then. Yeah, so I put on my list Bugsy Malone's another musical.
Ah, yeah.
Uh, so I love Bugsy Malone. It's just really good fun, and like it's just. Can you imagine like a gangster film? How would you pitch this? It's Alan Parker directed it,
Yeah.
and it's like Bugsy Malone's like a gangster film, like really, and it's about these gangsters going around killing each other, except their children going around these cars with pedals. So they're like riding a bike. It's just really good fun, and they're all dressed up in like 1920s. You got a very young Jodie Foster and who plays Bugsy Malone? Scott Baio, who was really big at the time and was in
Yeah.
Happy Days, was like a major heartthrob at the time. So he was kind of a kid at that time. But yeah, and there's loads of there's a cameo from Dexter Fletcher's Babyface, and
Oh, I forgot he
like the
was in that.
song.
Yeah.
Who?
I forgot Dexter Fletcher was in that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. He's got like a quick sort of cameo in it,
Yeah.
as Babyface. So and Bonnie Langford. There's lots of famous people when they were like kids that were there. But yeah, and it's just like a really good, fun film. And who wouldn't want to sort of fire a splurge gun? Because that ending was apparently they filmed that on the last day because that's the scene which had to basically they wrecked the whole set, didn't they? Because there's just
Yeah.
custard everywhere. But didn't you want to have one of those guns? They were amazing. They just sort of fire out loads of custard instead.
I still want one now, to be
I
fair.
know,
So yeah.
I want one. They're like really good fun. But apparently they were saying the production crew was saying it was just absolute carnage. Like everyone and everything was covered in all that splurge basically. But the songs are really good as well, and they're really, really catchy. And it was one of those films that we used to watch again and again and again as kids, me and my sisters. So my poor mum my poor mum and dad had to sort of say, "Oh God, it's Bugsy Malone again." But I never get tired of watching it. It's just a really catchy musical. But yeah, like, can you imagine being a kid in that film? It must have been so much fun to be dressing up in those costumes and like driving those cars. Well, not driving, but it's like a bicycle, wasn't it? But that was just such a good film. Um, have you seen it?
I have, yeah, I've seen it a few times. I've not seen it in ages though, so I need to rewatch it.
You should watch it with Lulu. I think she'd really like it.
Yeah, I think she would. The only problem is, she would be asking me for one of those guns.
Yeah, they should start reselling them, shouldn't they? They should sell them for Christmas. They'd go really quickly, and
Yeah,
they
I
wouldn't
think they
go
would.
down
Yeah.
well. They wouldn't go down well with the parents and you.
No, definitely not. No.
But yeah, Bugsy Malone is one of my top choices. It's just like a really good musical. It's really catchy. It's really good fun. There's lots of really sort of good songs, and the end, the final song is just very kind of cheerful. So it's just a really nice film, and it's kind of like you wouldn't imagine a film like that being directed by Alan Parker. That's his name, right? He
Yeah,
later on directed Madonna in Evita, and he's actually, I don't know if he's still the head or the director, the head director or the head of the BFI Institute. He was at one point, wasn't he?
he was at one point. Yeah, he died a few years ago, actually. So about
Oh
5 or
God, I didn't
6 years
realize.
ago. Yeah. Um,
Okay. Oh God,
but he
I
had
didn't
good
realize.
history with doing musicals because he did The Commitments as well, which is another
Ah,
really good feel good film, and then Fame as well. He did.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, he did Fame. I didn't
he did.
realize.
Yeah, yeah.
So was he the head of the British Film Institute, the BFI?
I think he was, or yeah, he was involved in it some way. Yeah,
Somehow, wasn't
yeah.
he? He was like a I mean, he was like a very kind of, well-known, prestigious English filmmaker. So like everyone knew him. But his his um his vision was always very unique. I think that's the best way to describe it.
Yeah, he did quite an interesting range of films as well. I think he's always been a little bit underrated considering some of the films he's
Yeah,
done.
yeah, and it's quite surprising because like if you mention a film like you just said, The Commitments, like, and then you compare it against, Bugsy Malone, you wouldn't think that would be the kind of thing he would do. Do you know what I mean? So he was obviously very eclectic and versatile in the projects he went for and decided to make. But yeah, Bugsy Malone is one of my favourites. So all right then. Anything else you want to say about that?
No, good choice.
Yeah, good choice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I need to watch it again. All right, let's go on to one of yours.
Okay, I reckon you might have this somewhere on your list. So I'm going to say The Full Monty.
No, I didn't put that on my list actually, funnily enough. But go for it. Why the Full Monty? That is a really good feel good
Yeah,
film.
I think this is one of those ones that it used to be on TV all the time. So I mean, I watched it like everyone else when it first came out, and then there was
Mm.
all this hype about it, being like the best British film of the decade or whatever. Um, and I loved it from like the first watch, and I didn't expect it to because it's about um,
It's a quite a hard
ex,
film, isn't it? Because they
yeah,
all lost their jobs because they're in Sheffield during the time of like
yeah,
everyone's basically unemployed. So it's quite. I think that's why English films work so well. Do you know what I
yeah,
mean? You got the drama behind it, and there's some kind of very serious issues behind them. But then there's also this kind of, they're very good at making it work as a comedy element. Do you know what I mean?
yeah. We do sort of bittersweet films very well. I think
Yeah,
almost better
yeah.
than anyone. Yeah,
They're kind of, they're in that film. There's not just one underdog. They're all kind of the underdogs, and you kind of think, they've gone through so much hardship, and they've come through the other side, and something positive from this will happen. Do you know what I mean? If that
yeah,
makes sense.
yeah.
Um,
It's just
yeah.
yeah,
So
it's just a
I
lot of fun. Yeah, so you got all the sort of there's a bit of the social commentary there about a specific time and area of being very depressed, and this is sort of a hangover from the Thatcher years where all these industries and
well, because it was a
manufacturing
steel
was closing
industry in
down. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The steel. It was a steel industry, wasn't it? And that
yeah,
was like be a big um booster for them, really, in the economy, etc. And then obviously Thatcher came along, and all that went kind of downhill. um,
yeah. And it's
and
it's like 7 or 8 years after, and it's that kind of thing of these guys that meet each other on the dole, and they all used to work together. Even their old supervisor, played by Tom Wilkinson.
didn't think they worked together though. I mean, I knew Gaz and what's his name, Robert Carlyle's characters were
Yeah,
friends. I didn't think they knew each other prior to that. I thought they
well,
just
I
knew each
think
other at the job
the
centre.
yeah the Tom I think the Tom Wilkinson character used to be Robert Carlyle's boss in it. Maybe the other guy as well. Um, so yeah, they have that kind of connection, and they've obviously been around each other in the job centre for a few years as well.
Yeah, I didn't realise. I thought they just kind of they knew of each other through the job centre basically while they're looking for
Yeah,
work. And he's not really a nice guy, is he, in that film to begin with, the Tom Wilkinson character? And
No,
then,
because he's sort of, because he used to be, Robert Carlyle's supervisor. He still kind of tries to
oh,
act a little bit like it, so
yeah, yeah.
he finds it
Well,
difficult not to be like a senior figure now.
that's
Um,
it. He's lost his job in a way. He's lost his identity, and he's got his wife who's going around
yeah, because he hasn't told
spending.
her, so
Yeah,
she's
yeah,
left spending
spending
money
all
and
his money when he's not, earning. So, and then obviously as the film progresses, you kind of realize that actually he's going through a lot, as this comes to light, and they all kind of come together. But I like the situation between him and his son, because him and his son, there's kind of that friction, isn't there? Because
yeah,
not friction between them, but the mum doesn't really want him to carry on seeing their son because he's not
yeah,
basically paying them child support because he can't afford to, etc. So yeah, it is a really hard film. But did you know that film? I think I said this before in one of the other episodes. Did you know that when they first shot that film, it would have gone straight into the dustbin? Like it was really bad when they got the end result. So what they had to do was, because it was terrible when it came out, the first, the first
yeah,
edit or whatever. It would have gone straight onto video or whatever. But then what happened was they got rid of the director and they got somebody else, and I think they had to reshoot some of the scenes, and then the editor, well, they got a different editor. I can't remember. It was something like that. Did it again. I think it was a different editor actually.
yeah.
Made it into what it was, and I mean, can you imagine a film like that winning at the Oscars? Did it win at the Oscars, or it was like one of the contenders, wasn't it?
I can't remember, to be honest. I know it probably did got a few BAFTAs, I would
It
imagine,
was
but
it was nominated for a few Oscars, I remember.
yeah,
But yeah, and it was at the time when Robert Carlyle was going from both Trainspotting to, because I think both films came out at the same time, or he just did Trainspotting and then he went
yeah. Trainspotting was
on
a
to.
year before, yeah. So he was just riding on that, and then obviously the TV show he did, Hamish Macbeth.
Yeah, but he was,
Yeah,
because I remember seeing it on Graham Norton, and he was explaining that actually he was kind of riding the wave of both of them because he was doing, there was the Train Spotting that came out, and then there was also the Full Monty. So he's kind of going through both of those things at the same time. When both of them were very um, culturally a big influence, especially on society in the 90s. So yeah, he did really well for himself that year, I think.
yeah, definitely, yeah, because he ended up being a Bond villain a couple of years later. So
Oh yeah, he
that
did,
would have
didn't
been,
he?
yeah, off the back of that, really.
Was he a Bond villain in one of the Bond films with Pierce Brosnan, or is it a different
Yeah,
Bond?
Brosnan, yeah. So The World Is Not Enough. This was Pierce Brosnan's second to last film as Bond.
Ah, okay. So obviously did really well for him then, casting wise, afterwards.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's what. Obviously, he had a few sort of bigger Hollywood roles as well that came
Yeah,
his way. But I think it's really well cast, the film as well, and I think it's one of those where anytime if I've got the TV on, say, and I just flick through a channel and the Full Monty's on, that's it.
yeah.
I have to watch the rest of the film. I can't
And the
switch off.
soundtrack's really good as well, isn't it? It's one of
Yeah,
those
yeah, the
soundtracks.
soundtrack is really great.
Yeah. And I always remember there's that scene where it's like, I remember thinking, why is Denzel from Only Fools and Horses in it? Because he's the one that does that dance, does he?
Yeah, he
Which
does
is
this
really
really kind of old-fashioned dance. He's not like
yeah,
yeah.
a horse. He's, and I'm like, what
We
can
won't
you
say
do?
why he's called Horse anyway. So
No, no, they do at one
yeah,
point. And who's that actor that everyone was kind of swooning over? He ends up being one of the gay characters,
I think
Hugh
his name,
something.
yeah, Hugo Spear. I think his name was.
Oh,
Yeah,
I had a big crush on him as well, and I like when he dropped his pants. He goes, "I can't really dance, but there's this." He dropped his pants. And Robert Carlyle goes, "Ladies and gentlemen, the lunchbox has landed." And they're all kind of like mouths open, staring at, and the son's there as well. He's like, "No, friend, no, friend." It is good, really good film. But loads of famous, loads of English actors got approached for that film because obviously it was an English low budget film at the time. And did you know I saw this somewhere because he was being interviewed? Remember Nicholas Lyndhurst, who played Rodney in Only Fools
Yeah,
and Horses?
yeah. So I didn't know you got approached for that though.
He got
Yeah.
approached for it. Sorry, there was a bit of a delay. He just kind of cut off. Yeah, he got approached for it, and he read it, and he was told that he would have to do it in a Sheffield accent because it's based in Sheffield, isn't it? And he just remembered thinking, "This is such a strange film." Like, I said it. And he passed on it, and it's like one of those. I mean, you always hear those stories, don't you, about
Yeah,
famous actors who pass down films and they really wish they hadn't, like Will Smith passing down Neo in The Matrix and things like that. So yeah, but that film made a really good profit back afterwards, considering I think it made like times three the amount it should have.
yeah.
So
Because
everyone got the
it broke America, so it made a lot more than probably expected, really. Then
yeah.
yeah,
But and I think I remember telling you this. The little boy, when his son in the film, when he got approached to do the film, his parents were given the option to either have so much money for doing the film up front or delay it and wait till any profit comes back. And that's usually how a lot of low budget films work, where what they'll do is they'll say, "Well, we pay you so much," and then it's not generally much, and then if any profit comes back, it gets split up between all of us. So basically, I mean, they kind of went for the safe option because they were like, "Okay, we'll take this whole big fee, as a one-off," and then it sort of boomed into this huge big thing, and made obviously three times the amount of money, and he never got it. Did you know about that, Tom? About
yeah, I think I remember you mentioning actually. Come to think of it,
yeah,
when we were doing
yeah.
best British films, we probably discussed this one. I would
I think we
imagine.
did.
Yeah,
Yeah, but it's such a good film, The Full Monty, isn't it? So it's definitely a good feel-good film, especially at the end.
yeah, definitely. Yeah.
All right, then. Anything else you want to say about it?
No, I think it speaks for itself. That film. I think so many people love it, and it's just really easy to watch.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
it's definitely, and it went on into the West End as well, didn't it?
yeah, yeah. It did. I think that was always going to be quite a good transition. Really, I think it was made for that as well
Mm,
with the soundtrack.
for sure. All right, then. Should we go on to one of mine?
Yeah, yeah, can do.
Hello?
So what's
Yeah, you
what's
went
your
off.
next? What's your next one?
Sorry, we cut off there, and you went off a minute ago. Um, so you'll like this one with Nell and I.
Oh yes, excellent choice.
it's it's just so I think it's very how to call it, identity. Everyone can identify with it, especially as struggling actors, because
Yeah,
it's Richard E. Grant and is it Paul McGann? Paul McGann,
yeah, Paul McGann.
and
Yeah,
there's just so many quotable quotes, and it sounds stupid.
yeah.
Really good, funny quotes, and he did it, didn't he? He redid it for the during one of the lockdowns. It's just like so many memorable quotes, like the cow and everything going,
Yeah,
and Uncle Monty, and it's just like one of those sort of cult classics, really. Um, but there's a scene where you always quote this, don't you? Where he's talking to the farmer and he goes, "Are you the farmer? We've come on holiday by mistake."
yeah.
And his friend's going, "Of course he's the effing farmer." Yeah. But why is it one of your favorite films, Tom? I'll
I think it's
ask
just
you.
one of those where every time I watch it, it just gets better and better. And I think, it's so brilliantly written that almost every line is quotable. I mean, I'm a member of like a Facebook group
No, are
where they
you?
just they keep quoting the lines, and they'll like alter them slightly for a situation, but you know you almost get to a point where you know every line. You could probably
I
sort of
know.
recite it word for word.
And there's that scene where he's like in the because they're both in the middle of the country, aren't they? They're at Uncle
Yeah,
Monty's house, and he's on the phone in one of those phone boxes on the phone to his agent,
yeah.
and he runs out. And it's like, oh, bitch, cut off with me, and then he has to call her back, and he goes, "I'm not understudying that play," and then he hangs up on her,
Yeah.
and then he goes, "I hate those Russian plays, always about whining women talking about ducks flying to Moscow," which
Yeah,
is true. It was a seagull, wasn't it? Yeah.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, it's just exactly like you said. There's just so many funny quotable quotes, that
yeah. Well,
I
it's actually
can't
one
think
of
of anyone.
it's one of Colin Farrell's favorite films as well.
Oh,
And
is
I
it
think,
really?
yeah, he had the best description of it. He said that there's not a wasted word in the film. And I think,
Yeah,
that's very true.
yeah. It's like everything's been used almost, isn't it? Word wise.
Yeah, and it's just this great sort of mix of, you've got sort of very sort of silly humor sometimes, and then all these like bizarre moments.
Like
They're
Uncle
getting,
Monty
yeah, Uncle
pouncing on his.
Monty, yeah, the poacher, almost getting into a fight with this, drunken Irishman in the pub as well.
Oh
Um,
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
I murdered the pair of you. And
yeah,
I like when he goes hunting for fish and just starts shooting in the stream. And when he gets a chicken, doesn't he?
yeah,
And he has to kill it himself.
yeah.
And
It's like, how do we make it die?
I don't know. It's probably best we don't find out.
I just think as
Oh,
well, with all of that, it's got these really kind of interesting observations about, life back then, and also those kind of people. Some of them were partially based on real people that the writer and director actually knew. So he lived with someone who was a lot like Withnail, who was also
hmm.
an aspiring actor.
A
Um,
struggling actor,
yeah, very highly strung and very kind of, full of himself as well.
theatrical.
Um,
Did he go around drinking and saying, "I demand to have some booze"?
I mean, it probably wasn't too far off that. And then, the Paul McGann character is sort of loosely based on Bruce Robinson himself. And then, because Bruce Robinson was also a struggling actor as well before he became
Hmm.
a sort of a writer. Um, and then the character in the film is also, he's a writer, but he doesn't really know what he wants to write at the moment. So, he just says it's just thoughts, really. So he just writes random things in the film.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
it comes across that way, doesn't it? It's just like these
yeah,
random sort of lines sort of creep in. Um, but I mean, I tell you what's funny is at the end of the film, it is kind of sad because it's like, I think he's kind of, I don't know if he's actually quite envious of his friend getting apart and going away. It's quite tragic, really, isn't it, when you think about it?
yeah. It is. I mean, because it's set as well. It's set in 1969, right towards the end of the year. So it's this like transitional period, very kind of. There was a very kind of big jump between the 60s and 70s in terms of like life in London and that kind of, that era. Um,
Yeah, and
yeah,
you hear
and
it by the
so
music
yeah,
as well, don't you? Because
yeah,
there's
you do as well.
like a Jimmy
Yes, yeah, yeah, great soundtrack in the film as well. Um,
Hendrix.
but there's this transition for the characters as well. So the Paul McGann's character can kind of move on, and he has an opportunity to move away from all this squalor and just going through the same motions all the time. Whereas with Nell's character, there's something a bit tragic about him in the fact that he's almost stuck like he is because he's so
Well,
stubborn.
I
And
think
yeah,
he's kind of decided to stay that way though. Do you know what I mean?
yeah,
He hasn't sort of got up and
yeah.
done things for himself or tried.
No, and he's
Do you
got
know
a
what I
big
mean?
ego as
So
well. Like he
yeah, but
won't
it's
be
one of these
he
people.
won't be an understudy, and he won't do this, that, or
Well, that's it,
yeah,
and then he's never going to progress that way. Do you know what I mean? He wants to get, so you've got to go through, jump through hoops, basically. So yeah, and it's like one of those other sort of English sort of films where there's there's drama to it as well, but it's just so funny. And
yeah.
there's a bit of the cow, the bull, and he's like he wants to get down there and have sex with those cows, and then he goes
Shot
charging
that
towards it.
gate. Yeah,
Yeah, shut that gate. But I just like the bit where he goes, "We've gone on holiday by mistake. Are you the farm?" So of course he's the thing. Well, but I think the character that stands out the most in that film, even though he's only in it for a very short time, is Uncle Monty. I just think Uncle
yeah,
Monty's so overly the top thespian. He's just like fake bloody cat,
yeah,
and sort of like with Nell's been feeding him lies, saying that his friend's a toilet trader and all this kind of stuff. So he's been preyed
yeah.
upon by Uncle Monty. Yeah, it's just these kind of
And he's quite a
there's
tragic
that scene.
character as well, isn't he? Because he's sort of
Well, yeah, he's not amended to, he
yeah,
hasn't become the actor
he's
that
had
he
to kind
wanted
of
to.
hide who he really is as well. Um,
Yeah,
Particularly kind of growing up for a time where homosexuality was illegal
well,
in the
especially
country.
then.
Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah,
he's had to have secret trysts in his holiday cottage. The farmer even says to Withnail and I that oh, they've seen Monty up there. His name's French or something, isn't it? Adrien de la Touche. He were up here with his son. Ah, that's him. Yeah.
yeah.
um,
So
yeah.
sorry,
But he does sort of, even when he's doing like regrettable things in the film, you can't help but feel sympathetic about the character because he's sort
and
of,
he's still very likable as well. Do you know what I
yeah,
mean? Even though he's quite, sometimes it's a bit cringe-worthy the way he does things and approaches Paul McGann's
yeah,
character.
because he's
It's just
completely sort of infatuated as well. So,
yeah, yeah, which is kind of really it's really uncomfortable and awkward while his nephew's in the house. Do you know what I mean? Um, but yeah, and there's that scene where they're in bed, aren't they? And they're terrified because they think it's the farmer breaking into the house.
yeah,
And he's like, it's you he's after. Offer him yourself. But yeah, it's just one of those films that never, lets down really. So yeah, with Nell and I is definitely one of my sort of feel good, sort of funny films for sure. All right, well, let's go on to one of yours.
oh, I can't top that now. That's difficult. I'm going to say Labyrinth is
Oh,
one.
okay.
Yeah, this
I
is one
never
that,
watched. I think I did as a kid, and then I never saw it again, and it never really did anything for me. But why the labyrinth? I think you brought this one up before as well. But
yeah.
why?
Um, it's just one of those, again, it's the musical side of it is really sort of catchy. It's a really fun film, I think, as well, just because this is back at a time where they didn't have, CGI. So they've essentially built this whole world in a studio. It was shot in, I think it's Pinewood, or one of the other studios over in the UK, but they shot everything in like a studio, built all the sets up. They built this whole kind of elaborate labyrinth world and then
Hmm.
put puppets in David Bowie with his tights that are a bit too tight.
It is a strange film to see David Bowie in.
Well, so yeah, but I think he ends up being so perfect in the role. Um, it's just one of those I can watch again and again. And now I've got to the
Mm.
point where, my daughter will watch it, um, every now and again she'll fancy watching it. So I never object, let's put it that way, when she
Yeah,
wants to put it on. Yeah.
and a very young Jennifer Connelly in that film as well, isn't there?
Yeah, and I think she always had a bit of a maturity to her, so she's really good in the role.
How old was she in that
I
film? Was
think
she
she was
like
about 15, so she's not like young, but she's still it's still
a
quite
child? Yeah.
a challenging role for her.
Mm,
Because it's all about sort of growing up and having to sort of face responsibilities and things. And she's kind of it's a little bit like Alice in Wonderland or Wizard of Oz, where you can kind of read it that it's all in her head,
yeah.
which maybe is a bit of a disturbing angle, really, when you think about it. But I just find it, yeah, really enjoyable with the songs and the silliness because it's written by one of the Monty Python writers.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, Terry Jones. So
Okay.
yeah, he co-wrote it with Jim Henson, but there's definitely a lot of sort of Python-esque humor in it every now and again,
Mm.
with some of the characters that she encounters, and there's like silliness in it. It's just really
Um,
good fun.
do they use any of the Jim Henson creatures? I think they did, didn't they?
Yeah, it's all Jim Henson stuff. Yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah,
thought it was.
yeah. And then the guy who did all the creature designs, his son is the baby in the film.
Mm.
So yeah, it's just a really good sort of film back in their time where these sort of kids films were they had a little bit of a dark edge to them and they were very sort of quirky and
There were quite a lot
imaginative.
of those films, though, weren't there, in the
There
80s?
was, yeah, like Never Ending Story as well, quite
Yeah.
similar. Has some dark moments in it, and
Mm. You wouldn't see that being made now for kids, those
no,
kind of.
definitely not, no. And I think there's just something about the handmade feel of it, that it's all made in sets, and you can see things. You can see a bit of like three dimensions in where they're walking through.
Mm.
Whereas nowadays it would just all be green screen backgrounds, and that's it really.
Yeah, it's a shame, isn't it? Because I think people were more inventive and more creative.
Yeah, and I think it helped the actors as well. I mean, for like Jennifer
Yeah.
Connelly and walking through these sets, and even there's some wide shots where you'll see like a puppet riding on a dog, and then it
Yeah, but
sort of
then
goes past her, and then the puppet turns and sort of nods to her and waves and says hello. And you're thinking, how did they do that? And this is like a wide shot, and you start thinking about these things like, how did they do that? Um, Whereas obviously, if it's CGI, the answer straight away. It's CGI.
and also I think, the actor has something to bounce off and someone or something to react off. Whereas
Yeah,
now what
exactly.
they have
Yeah,
to do is just stand there looking at someone with a like a tennis racket above their head,
yeah,
trying to imagine this creature. So I mean, you think about it, acting is when you're reacting to someone and what they're saying. So if there's, do you know what I mean? So it's, and they've all said that it's very tedious because you have to imagine, you got someone standing there with like, like a stick and, a fake sort of cut out head to sort of give you something to look at, for when they later put on the CGI effects and stuff. So it's become very kind of tedious and a bit boring, and I think now, which is a shame in a way, isn't it?
yeah, definitely. I think and everything in a lot of these films, even the really big budget ones where it's all done on computers, it just looks quite flat, and
Mm.
they've not really got that kind of sense of space or depth to them, and you can kind of it feels a bit weightless where they're reacting to things or being chased by things or thrown by things. Whereas I think things that are physically there on set, they have a weight to them, and that you can't really they've not really worked out how to fake yet, I don't think.
Yeah. Well, they had to use their brains more, and they had to be more, like I said, inventive. You have
Yeah,
those horror films, and
yeah.
you wondered how the hell did they do those things?
Well, then, yeah,
They
yeah, and you
panicked.
ration those moments as well, don't you? So they have more impact. Whereas, if you're doing something with computers, then you can just have as much as you like, and then they throw big long 20-minute sequences, and it just gets tiresome. Rather than
Definitely.
these, carefully selected moments where they show you a visual effect that's actually in camera. So it just had a lot more impact and physicality, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely, for sure.
Yeah.
All right. Is there anything else you want to say about the labyrinth?
No, I think it just people love that film, and I think it's quite understandable why.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree. All right. Should we go into my last one?
Okay. Yeah.
So I'm gonna go for Muriel's Wedding.
Oh, that's a good choice.
Um, you know what's funny about that film is that like I talk about it with my sisters or people kind of my generation, and they all love that film. But actually, it's quite a tragic film, really, if you think about it. I mean, it's funny, but there's also elements of tragedy, like the
Yeah.
mum and the father being so just really nasty to his kids and saying that they do nothing, they amount to nothing, and all this kind of stuff. But I think the reason why it's such a good kind of feel good film is that it's kind of she finally accepts herself. That she realizes that she got married because she thought, well, even though it's a fake marriage to this awful guy who has a terrible accent, by the way, is meant to be South African and doesn't sound at all South African. He's an Australian actor. I can't remember his name. He's really good looking in that film, though, Tom, isn't he? As the swimmer.
I'll take your word for that.
Yeah. um, but yeah, and then she realizes that actually after being married, it doesn't do anything. She's still not happy, so it's something she has to do for herself. So it's kind of like a sort of self-acceptance film. And but there's just like some really funny scenes, like with her and her friends are so obnoxious. Those girls are so horrible to her.
I know. Yeah. It's just yeah.
They're really nasty to her, but I like how she and her friends want to kind of sort of get back at them. It's just such a funny film as well, but it's also quite tragic as well. But is there anything you want to say about Muriel's Wedding?
Well, I think it's one of those where you've got a lot of the humor in it, and I really kind of like that kind of laid back Aussie humor as well.
Yeah, it's
Um,
funny. It's quite
yeah,
dry as well, isn't it?
yeah,
It's
very
like,
dry. Yeah,
yeah.
but I think because you've got that, you've got the emotional aspects of it, and you've got some of the kind of darker moments in the film as well,
Hmm.
and some like quite sort of hard hitting sort of family issues.
Yeah.
But so some of which are quite relatable as well. The friction that people have with their family. That's just there sometimes. Um, I think having that bittersweet element is quite a good thing in a even if your a film is ultimately uplifting. I think if your characters have been through quite a journey, it just makes it feel even more uplifting if the by the end, if they've been through something, and they've had some dark moments.
Hmm. Yeah. It's just such a really, it's quite, and she's quite an endearing character, isn't she?
Yeah,
She's
definitely for sure. Yeah, and Tony
she
Collette's amazing. So
she's really good. She's very
yeah,
versatile. And she was like 21 in that film. So, and I think she had to put on like a ridiculous amount of weight to play Mario, because she changes her name, doesn't she? Because she doesn't want to be Muriel, because
yeah.
Muriel reminds her of someone who was really unhappy at home, and so everyone's like, Mario. Oh, and what's her sister always say? You're terrible, Mario. Yeah, and there's that actor who plays her dad, and he's the same guy that's in Strictly Ballroom. That's another one of my favorite Aussie films. But yeah, I think Muriel's Wedding is just one of those. It's really sweet. It's really endearing, and it's funny, and it's kind of a nice film to see her kind of think. Actually come out from the other side and think, well, she doesn't have to get married in order to be happy, and she sort of finally finds a job and in a place where she can be happy and settle down and be happy with who she is, really. So I think that's why it's such a likable film, because everyone can relate to it at some point or another. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'd say Muriel's Wedding. Is there anything else you want to say about Muriel's Wedding? Can't really think of it. It's just a really nice, funny film, really.
It is, no, very good choice.
Yeah. All right, let's go on to your last one.
Okay, all this is difficult. So I think I'm gonna go with Rocky.
Okay. Why Rocky? That's another
The
underdog one, isn't it?
another, yeah, I think, underdog stories. I love underdog stories. They're always good, and you can always kind of relate to them.
Yeah.
Um,
Why don't you explain to someone, to the audience, in case they don't know what an underdog is, what that means?
it's someone who is, say, on a lower level, and life is kind of keeping them down, but they have this moment where they can kind of rise up and just have their moment in the sun, basically. So, um, Rocky is the classic underdog where he's always the one who's expected to be, he's just, they always write him off as this bum. And,
Yeah.
he obviously, we can't really spoil it because it's, 45 years old or whatever it is now. But, um, yeah, Rocky gets this kind of opportunity to, it's like a publicity stunt really from the world champion Apollo Creed, who's basically
Mm.
modeled off like Muhammad Ali, quite cocky and arrogant, and he's like the best of the best. He's meant to be having this world championship fight, and then the fighter backs out, so he thinks, right, I'm going to get a local fighter, anyone, and just do an exhibition. And so they pick Rocky out of a hat, basically, not expecting anything to kind of, not expecting there to be a big challenge or anything. But then, come the fight, Rocky's big kind of thing is that he wants to go the distance with Apollo Creed because no one's ever gone the full 15 rounds with him. So that's
Mm.
his goal, that he'll just be standing by the end of the fight. And obviously Apollo Creed takes him lightly at first, and then Rocky kind of shows him up a little bit. So then
Mm.
Creed has to really get into the fight. And yeah, it's just a really good, uplifting film. But
Film.
whereas all the sequels, yeah,
Can
they
you understand the word he's saying?
a little bit, yeah. I think I've been so accustomed to Sly Stallone that I've kind of tuned in now, so I
Oh,
know what he's
really?
saying. Yeah,
You can understand what
um,
he's saying.
yeah. But I think the thing about this one is that, as much as being a film, it's not really a film about boxing, whereas the sequels tended to be that they were films about it was all leading up to the fight and these big moments. But
Mm.
the film really is more a love story at the heart of it between him and Adrian, and it's about he's this kind of you know working class blue collar kind of bum character, and she's this quite shy character, and it's these two kind of unlikely matches that come together.
Mm.
And then she's an underdog as well, really, because everyone kind of underestimates her because she doesn't say much, and she's kind of put upon by her brother, Paulie, played by Burt Young. So
Hmm.
he's not like abusive, but he's kind of like rude to her all the time, and he expects her to cook and clean.
Yeah.
um yeah, so she comes out of her shell, and then Rocky kind of learns to be a bit more, I guess, considerate, and you know, being with a nice woman, it's kind of like it broadens his horizons a little bit, and then he feels kind of like love for the first time, and that this is all while he's kind of preparing for this big moment, this big fight as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just like it's one of the great underdog stories, and I think that's also mirrored in the story behind the actual film, where Sylvester Stallone was
Well, he
offered.
was really poor, wasn't he? He was like
Yeah,
struggling badly. He lost his dog, and then
yeah,
he
he had
managed to
he had
buy
to
his dog
sell it.
back.
Yeah, he had to sell his dog, and he was offered big sums of money for his script because they didn't. He was unknown, so they didn't want him in there. They wanted like
Yeah,
I think they was talking about Ryan O'Neal, maybe Robert Redford. They wanted like a big star to play the
yeah, of
character.
course, because
Yeah,
yeah, to
so
sell the film.
yes, but Stallone in the end said, "Look, I don't want. I I'm not going to sell it unless I'm the lead." So they paid him sort of the minimum you could sort of pay someone to be in it in the end, and then because they didn't want to outlay too much because it was going to be quite a gamble to give
Yeah,
this guy the role. But then obviously it paid off because he got nominated for 2 Oscars, I think, for the first film, for the script and for his performance as well. So
yeah. But
yeah,
the guy that he actually did sell the dog to, this guy, and then when he wanted his dog back,
yeah,
so the only way the guy would give him his dog back was by getting a scene or cameo appearance in the film. So he says like one line, and
yeah,
that's it, and then he got his dog back. But the dog was massive, wasn't it? It's like one of those
yeah.
huge, massive. And he was on Graham Norton, and he was saying that do we, because it was him and his wife. He was like saying, well, do we eat or do we feed the dog? And it was just like they were that broke. But
Yeah,
who produced that film, Tom? Do you know?
it was
Isn't it John
Irwin Wing.
Travolta? Or am I thinking something else?
Oh no, I think you're thinking of Staying Alive, the Saturday Night Fever sequel. Because
Oh, was it the other way around?
yeah, Stallone directed the sequel to Saturday Night Fever.
Oh, okay, okay. So
Yeah,
I got confused. I know they sort of did something together.
yeah, and I think Travolta was trained by Stallone, so he got into really kind of good shape for that film, um,
Okay.
Staying Alive, and it did terribly all round. Like the critics hated it, and yeah, it got panned completely. But uh, I think Travolta's still quite keen on it because he got into such good shape, and he'd never kind of been like that before or since.
Hmm.
Uh, yeah, but I mean, Rocky's just a really great film, really uplifting. And then the sequels got progressively silly, and I still kind of enjoy them.
Which
Uh,
one is the one with Mr. T?
so that's Rocky 3,
Oh, okay.
and that's also got Hulk Hogan in it, so it's a little bit.
Oh, is it?
But they get sort of progressively silly, and then you got Rocky 4, which is like this whole Cold War, America versus Russia kind of thing, and it's literally just sort of 3 music montages and training scenes and a couple of fights, and that's almost it. But I love that film as well, Rocky 4.
Oh, do you?
Yeah, great soundtrack as well. So yeah,
Well,
that'd
the
be
music's amazing, isn't it? It's like the
yeah.
first one where he's like do 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 do, and he's running up the stairs. Do, do, do. Everyone knows that song.
Everyone, I mean, it just gets you pumped up. I think it makes you want to go running up, you know, fully steps or
Yeah,
nearest steps or stairs you can find.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Um, yeah.
yeah. And then you're like,
Did you know? I think Stallone, his character Rocky, he has pet turtles in the film. I think he's still got the turtles.
has he
These little,
really?
yeah. Um, I think they were called Cuff and Link in the film, and I think he's still got them now because they live a
What are
long
they?
time.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah, Cuff and Link, I think it was.
Oh, really?
So,
He's
yeah,
really
something
funny
along
though.
that. Yeah.
Have you seen his sort of YouTube videos? He's always winding his daughters up. He's got a good sense of humor, I
Yeah.
think.
Well, you got to wind them up, don't you?
Yeah.
Ask Lulu.
Yeah, I'm sure you do. All
Yeah.
right then. Should we wrap it up?
Yeah. I think good episode. So hopefully people will have a nice weekend, feeling good watching these films.
Yeah. I think we all need some cheering up for sure because it's just been a horrible time, hasn't it, for everyone? So go and watch something fun or lovely and nice. something that cheers you up.
Yeah.
Anything you want to say, Tom?
No, I mean, if people want to leave their comments on, YouTube and everything else, that maybe we can get a few suggestions ourselves as well. So
That's a
let's
good
hear your
idea.
suggestions.
What you want us to do episodes wise, some
Yeah.
themes and things like that. Good. All right then. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Sonia. See you later.